Welcome back to the BTS Happy Hour podcast. I'm your host, Andrea. It's been an eventful week for ARMY with a lot of emotional moments, so I felt the need to record another episode not too long after the last one. And I had left off just before the Festa dinner, so I think we've all watched that and we know what happened and heard about BTS deciding to take a break and work on more solo stuff and recharge before they come back together as a group. And, I'm explaining it now. It sounds very simple, but this got so misconstrued, probably intentionally, by so many people out there that, I don't know, they just have to say negative things about BTS. And that gets clicks, I guess. But in any case, I wanted to talk about the Festa dinner for sure. That was a very big moment for ARMY and maybe something we weren't expecting, what they were talking about. So this year, BTS posted their Festa dinner on June 14th. And if you're ARMY, you know that every year they all meet up for dinner and they look back on the year and talk about what's going on with them and how they're feeling and any other insights they have. And I'm trying to remember past Festas, but I think the dinner isn't always posted last. Like sometimes it happens in the middle of Festa or earlier in Festa, I think, because usually it's nothing crazy happens. It's just more of a fun thing, and it's just them reflecting on themselves as a group. So I don't think anyone read anything into it this time, the fact that that was the last content of Festa that was released. But now, in hindsight, yeah, you can definitely see why they saved it for last, because it had the more serious discussions, and it isn't necessarily, the fun, happy part of Festa. It's more the serious topics. Yeah, this year's Festa dinner got a little more real than past years. You know what the 2022 Festa dinner is like? It's like the blip. Remember in the Avengers when half the people were blipped out of existence by Thanos? And that event, it marked a moment in time, and so in the movies that were after that, it was always referencing, oh, what happened in the blip? Did you go away, or were you one of the people that stayed around? And everybody uses that as a marker of something that happened that everybody experienced. And it feels like this dinner is like the blip. It's like we know what it was like before the dinner and what it was like after. And I know BTS can appreciate the Marvel comparison since they've been referencing that a lot lately, but I think it is really useful when you want to explain certain things if it happened in Marvel universe, because we're all familiar with it, so it's an easy thing to reference. And so the Proof Live was scheduled for 5 a.m. in my time, and so was the Festa dinner the next day. And I'm still wondering, why was that necessary for HYBE? Did it need to be that early in the morning? Especially since it was a tape thing. Like, they could have just released it at a normal time. So I was already sleep deprived from the day before, from when V went on V Live early in the morning, and then Proof Live was on at 5. But this time I didn't try to wake up at 5 a.m., even though I know that's when the Festa dinner was being released, because I didn't think it was going to be anything monumental happening. I was like, well, I'll just watch it, later on in the day. It'll be fine. And yeah, I wouldn't have been able to wake up probably anyway. So I woke up between, 6 or 7 on that day. And before I got a chance to even watch the video, I saw on Twitter people were posting that they were sad and they were crying, and they were posting screenshots of things that ARM had said during the dinner. So I was like, oh, wow, okay, they must have said something something major, something serious on this dinner. So I already knew before I watched it was going to be a big thing before I started. So, okay, so at the beginning of the video, it says the real BTS dinner party, not scripted, not staged. It's all BTS. Sincerity of ARMY, by ARMY, for ARMY. Welcome to the real and honest dinner party. And I don't know why they said that, because I never thought the past ones were scripted. Like, they did have these predetermined questions, like things they were going to ask everybody and that everybody had to answer, but I didn't think they like scripted all that. It was just, okay, maybe they knew questions ahead of time so they could think about it, but I don't think their responses were scripted. So right away, like having that disclaimer, it's like, okay, they're going to be very honest today. So it's like preparing ARMY for watching this. It's like, wait, what are they going to say though? And in the beginning, it looked, pretty normal, like a typical dinner. And they were pouring drinks. They were getting their food. They had some like really good charcuterie, it looked like. Some cheese and wine and crab legs and flatbread. It all looked pretty tasty. And they were kind of making small talk about, Suga has his busy schedule now. He's learning Pilates and English lessons. And they were doing a toast. And J-Hope brought up how everybody loves the J-Hope drinking beer meme, which is pretty funny. That's from like a couple festas ago where I guess J-Hope had too much to drink, and there's just some pretty hilarious screenshots of him looking like super out of it. So that's been a meme many times since then. And they talked about what they've been up to. Jin has been doing a lot of gaming. And Jimin has been working on his songs. And J-Hope chimed in and said, yeah, I heard them and they sounded pretty good. And then Jungkook was like, wait, I haven't heard any of these songs. And then they had to clarify. It's like, oh, well, he just happened to be there. J-Hope was just around. And Jimin was like, I will play them for anybody, So I think everybody's eager to hear Jimin in the songs that he's working on. And then they said that, Suga's in a lot of demand as a producer, especially after that came out. I think everybody was impressed by that. And he's been also working on his dancing and vocals and then learning other instruments. And they said that he's like a trainee again. And he's also got a 5-year plan to learn English. So I was like, wow, that's really ambitious. He's got a lot on his plate right now. And then RM has said that fans had been asking why did they release an anthology album in their 9th year. So why was Proof an anthology album instead of a new album? And then he kind of said, I mean, we know most of this part, but it's interesting to hear it all together as a story, because I don't think we've heard the entire story until this dinner. But originally the plan was for On and Map of the Soul 7 to be the last of the promotions, and then they were planning on going on a huge world tour, which probably would take a year, and then they would visit all over the world at all the major places. And then COVID happened, and so they had to cancel the whole tour. And I think maybe after the tour they were going to reassess and see, would we have to enlist at this time? Like, what is the situation with the laws at that point? And also, should we take a break as a group? I think that was going to be what they were going to do. But when COVID happened, they instead just took a few months break, and we know they had a hard time with that, because just not doing anything. I mean, even though they wanted to have a break, they wanted to do that after they did all the touring that they wanted to do. So the timing of it was just like, couldn't be worse. And so there was a couple of tough months there where they didn't really know what direction to go in. And then later in the summer 2020, they were working on Dynamite, and then We know after that they were working on the B album, and that was something they decided to do during the COVID times to try to help ARMY and reflect a little bit. I think they tried to use that time well. I think they just weren't sure like when COVID was going to end, and like if it ended soon enough, maybe they could still do their plan. But I think it was just like there's so much uncertainty that they weren't sure what decision to make. And I think RM alluded to that. It's like, okay, it's hard to make the perfect decisions when you don't know what's coming up and you don't know what is exactly the right path. So they put out the B album, and they kind of feel like Life Goes On is very underrated and not given a lot of recognition. And I kind of agree, even though I think I think B is a great album, very underrated, and Life Goes On is kind of ignored a lot. But that's just how it is. Just music. Sometimes some songs catch on more than other songs. I don't think they should take that as to mean anything like, oh, we hated that song or anything. It's just, some things get more attention than others. Then Sugar was saying, oh, if they had made a certain choice, they might not have been there. And then COVID would have been over when they were done. So I think he might have been talking about what if they just decided to enlist right at the beginning of COVID, then maybe they would have been all done with it by the time that was over. And I don't know if you remember, but we talked about this way back in the pandemic, and Morgan was saying, yeah, that would have been the way to go. They should have enlisted right away, right when COVID started, and then maybe they wouldn't have had to do the full time because they were shortening some people's time from COVID, and then so maybe they wouldn't have had to do 18 months total. Maybe it would have been less, and then even if it was 18 months, like, okay, COVID lasted a long time anyway, so they would have been done with it by the time they would be able to tour again. And yeah, I mean, that was a thought that was going around, and then some people suggested, and like Morgan was on board with that idea, but I think it's hard to just pull the trigger on that, because then you're committed to it. Like, oh, we're enlisting, and now it's going to be this many months are just off the table, and you don't know. Maybe COVID was about to end in like 1 or 2 months. You don't know. So, but yeah, it's really hard to make the perfect decisions. You can't really look back on stuff like that with regret because you did the best you could with the information at the time. The government isn't being much help. Like, is there going to be an exemption? Is there going to be a situation where their enlistment is different or they don't have to do it? Like, all that was uncertain. They talked a little bit about that. And then they were talking about how their house contract has come to an end. And so they're moving out of the house that they all had lived in together. So I wasn't sure if they even still live together at this point in 2022. But I figured, they probably had the house just for convenience. And so if they all need to be staying in one place, that is available. But then we know that probably all of them have a separate house of their own, but it's just, we don't know exactly what they're doing like day to day. If they, live in their own personal houses some of the time, or, certain times they get together in the joint house. But yeah, it sounds like now that's over. They don't have the house that they all live in. So I think that's fine at this point. I'm sure they have like separate lives, and it's not like trainee times where, okay, it's really important that everybody is together a lot of the time, not just for scheduling, but also for, learning to get along with each other and work as a team. So I think that makes sense. And I'm sure they have all the past memories anyway of all those hard times when they were living in like really small dorms. And I mean, you can see on the really old Bangtan bombs all the the places where they lived before. They were very, very cramped. So I think that's all in the past now. And they started talking about how each of them has their own style in decorating their own houses. And that kind of reminds me of in the B promotions when they showed each person with an individually decorated room. So it turns out like, okay, that is the case. They all had their separate houses now with their own personal style. So I think their houses sound like what you might expect. Like Jin's house is like gaming central, and Arm's place is like a museum or like, artsy with, lots of decorations and stuff on the walls. And they said Suga's house he said it has his dad's style, I think is what he said. And they had the funniest comments about Jungkook because they're like, he has mattresses in all these different rooms. He has 20 diffusers. It's like, they made him sound very eccentric. But yeah, I think he doesn't need to have structure. It's just like, let's have mattresses, here and there. That way I can like take a nap at any time. I mean, he probably has a gigantic house, so maybe this is warranted. And diffusers, you gotta keep the air at the right consistency, right? And so then, they went into the serious part of the conversation here about, okay, the translation said they were going into hiatus now. And later they said, okay, that the translation wasn't super accurate. Like, we didn't want to say the word hiatus. It was meant to be a break, or if you interpret it a different way, it's off time, But yeah, using the word hiatus, I guess it has a connotation that the group won't do anything. Like it sounds more negative, I guess. And so that was not the right word to be used. But yeah, what it said in the subtitles is like, we're going into a hiatus now. And I think the problem there is that there's other groups that said, oh, we're going on a hiatus, but we are definitely getting back together later in a couple years after, we've had some time. And, I'm talking about One Direction. So I guess it's really their fault because they used the word hiatus and then never got back together. And it's like, okay, that was your intention. That's fine. But I think they used the wording to mislead people. Like, they didn't want to tell their fans, like, well, this band is over. We're disbanding. They didn't want to actually say that. So I think now anytime someone says, well, we're going on a hiatus or we're going on a break, everybody questions it and they think, well, that band is over. That group is over. The problem is people think that's a euphemism, and it's when BTS uses, like, they mean a hiatus. They don't mean it as a different action. But yeah, I think later I was reading like, okay, the translation was a mistake or like a mistranslation, and what Suga had said was closer to meaning off time. And yeah, like a true hiatus would mean like the group wouldn't do anything, but they are still planning on doing some things together as a group. They are still gonna film Run BTS. They just won't be recording music and touring just yet, because in the meantime they're going to be pursuing more of their solo work, and whether that is a mixtape or collaborations or whatever other skills they want to work on in that time. And they even brought up about mixtapes. Like a mixtape is just, it's released on streaming. Like it's songs they worked on, but I don't think it's available for sale. But they said that from now on, like, their solo work isn't going to be a mixtape. It's going to be actual albums. And so it will have promotions, and it'll be available for purchase and streaming. So I think that's another change that they discussed. So they went back to talking about the COVID situation, and they weren't sure what they were going to do because of COVID, and they did eventually come out with Dynamite and Butter and Permission to Dance, and then the B album. They were just kind of going back to putting out a few songs, but even at that point they weren't sure what type of group they were anymore. And the problem with the K-pop system that they were talking about is it doesn't give artists time to mature, and they don't have time to think about their albums in an artistic way. It's just a constant output of music and content, which is really amazing when you think about it, because I thought their albums have all been very artistic and thoughtful and well done, but it sounds like maybe they have like run out of steam. So I think it all comes down to, they've been working in a group for 10 years, and with constant schedules, there's a point where you run out of gas and you need to recharge. But yeah, that is the problem with the K-pop industry, is that they just want constant output. And, it got pretty emotional at this point, because they were each kind of explaining what happened with it, and they feel like it's hard to discuss these kind of topics. They don't want to tell fans like we're tired, and they feel like they're letting them down because fans have brought them this far, and then they wouldn't be living up to their expectations. But if that's their feelings, and then that's their feelings. If they're feeling burnt out, if they're feeling like, oh, I have my role, I don't want to just clock in and then do the bare minimum. I want to be like a full artist and be expressing what ideas I want to express, not just putting out, any old music. A lot of artists today do that. It's just about money. It's just like about having output and putting out albums. So I think they did a good job explaining, like, they've kind of lost their direction as a group just because of all of the time pressures on them, and they need more time to get back to how they were before. And V was saying that, most fans wouldn't think badly of them because, we understand their sincerity, and that he said 90% of fans will root for them no matter what direction they go. I was like, oh, that's very interesting that he says 90%. It's like, who are these 10%? They need to leave. These 10% that are not supporting BTS. And yeah, I mean, I'd for sure understand, because Western artists take breaks all the time. And yes, I think some of the times it's like, oh, it's very excessive in between albums. It might be like 3 years between albums, but at least they have come back on their own schedule, and when they feel like they can artistically put together a set of songs to their satisfaction. Like it's more geared towards the artists in the West. Or yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe there's just like more of an understanding that people can't just be working nonstop. And yeah, I think they have felt bad because they're always trying to think of what fans want, but what fans want is just more music coming out or more content. But, they also have to think about their role as artists. So like, what do they want fans to remember them as? So I think Real Army 100% supports BTS doing whatever they need to do to find their identity again. And then Jimin said that the group has many things they want to tell us, but they can't tell us everything. And so I wonder if he was referring to the decisions they made during COVID, and like what was the reason behind them, which they couldn't tell us at the time. Or is he more talking about like they'd like to share personal life stuff with us, but then they can't because of the K-pop industry doesn't let them talk about dating or whatever else is going on in their life that might impact them as a group. So, yeah, I wasn't sure what he meant by that comment. And then RM was saying it feels wrong to even say that they're exhausted. And I think that made us feel bad, ARMY feel bad, because it's like, well, we want them to be able to say when they can't continue, you know. And I think overall we feel bad watching this because it's clear that they are struggling and they were trying to just keep going for ARMY's sake, but you know, it's at a point where they have to take action. They can't just keep going and be robots, you know. So I think RM did a lot of the talking, and I'm sure they all feel the same way he does. But I do think more of this affects him because he is the leader of the group, and a lot of the decisions are central to him as far as coming up with the lyrics and the group message and things like that. So I think he felt a lot of burden with this situation, and hopefully now that they've made this decision that the burden has been lifted. I hope he feels like a weight's been lifted, because I think this will be a good time for them to rediscover their individual messages and stories that they wanted to tell. And you know, at this point in the dinner, they were talking more about what they want to work on during this off time and individual stuff. And I think it all sounds very promising. It's like these are things that they wouldn't have time for during the normal schedule of the group because it's so demanding. And they're talking about solo preparations are happening, and that's why J-Hope was asked to be a headliner at Lollapalooza is because he is going to be the first to release solo material. And so I think they mentioned later that mid-July is when J-Hope would have an album coming out. So that's very exciting. And I think it's going to be, it's not even going to feel like they went anywhere because they're all going to have solo releases. They said they're planning on each of them having a solo album, which is crazy. So that's going to be like 7 albums. That's tons of material. It's like, okay, BTS, the group, may not have an album, but there's going to be so much music and so much going on. It's not going to feel like they're away. But yeah, I think they also mentioned the friendship tattoos, and this is now, we know later that this has been something that they've gotten started doing. So I think that's great. And I'm sure it has to do with this whole release of Proof and commemorating their time as a group. I think it's pretty clear they're all committed to it. And so towards the end, they kind of reiterated, okay, we're not disbanding. We're just spending time apart. This is going to be BTS Chapter 2, where we do more individual work, and then they'll come together as a group again, and they will be better than ever, and they will be recharged. So I think they said a lot. They really put their feelings out there, and I think a lot of ARMY was pretty emotional after watching that. It's like, we don't like seeing them upset, but you know, sometimes these conversations have to happen, and this is how people grow, is like they go through experiences and then they process them. So BTS won't be performing together as a group for a while, and I think it's great. They want to preserve their artistic integrity. They don't want to just put out, you know, albums of material just to do it, just to make money. So you have to respect that. And now in hindsight, a lot of things make sense because, they kept talking about a new chapter and the fact that this album was an anthology and the fact that they're all getting tattoos to show that they are 7 and why was ARMY getting so much love this Festa, even though each Festa is like that. It just seemed like more. And also why they have Born Singer as the beginning of the album. I think that's something that really sets the stage for how hard they worked as a group and what the message was before. And why did they start individual Instagram accounts? Remember that happened just recently. And so there has to have been a plan in place, because knowing that they're going to be doing solo things, of course, you need separate accounts. And of course, the J-Hope performing at Lollapalooza, that was a surprise, but then now that completely makes sense. So I'm just wondering how most of ARMY out there feels about it. I saw a lot of reactions online. I think everybody was being pretty reasonable and I think people, they feel sad, but then they respect BTS's decision and they want to support them and support them making moves that are best for their own health, and their own well-being. Like we feel bad that just being a fan, that automatically puts a lot of pressure on them to keep going without complaining, and so they didn't want to disappoint us. So I think it's tough to swallow, because it's like, oh, well, we were part of the negative pressure that was on them. So I do feel bad for people who were waiting for more concerts because they didn't have the chance to travel to as many places. Like their world tour, I'm sure, was supposed to go everywhere, and they could only do a few dates before, this cutoff time came up. So I think that's unfortunate. But I think ARMY appreciates that they came to us to explain this decision, and they didn't let Big Hit just post a notification and I think or just, a note on Instagram or something. That's what a lot of artists do. Or they don't even explain it. They're just like, well, they're just, missing for months and people don't really know what they're up to. So I think that says something about the respect that they have for ARMY, that they even explain this and then, put their feelings out there, their thoughts out there. Most artists aren't going to let themselves be vulnerable like that. So I think you have to appreciate that they opened their hearts to us and explained everything. And I'd mentioned earlier that I thought that RM, yes, he talked the most, but I do think he is also the most affected by the situation, because I think they wouldn't be doing this off time if he was still willing to continue as normal. And I think it's because he's at the heart of a lot of their creative process in the group, and then as the leader, he's very interconnected with their vision. And so I think he must have put his foot down. It's like, okay, hi, we really need this off time. We have to do this. So I just think he seemed the most vulnerable and the most emotionally spent by all of this. So I think he will really benefit taking this time to work on his solo stuff and replenish himself creatively. And I think that's also why he visited so many museums and places of art. He just wanted to bring back that inspiration again. So I think you have to look at, famous authors, they often go off into the woods away from technology, away from people, in order to write their books, they're great books. So, I can't imagine having to come up with the great American novel or whatever, and while having to work a like 8 to 5 job, like a really demanding job. Like it's hard to just create art on demand. But then I also thought about it, and it seemed like Suga was able to have enough time to put together his mixtapes, and he worked on multiple collabs as a producer. And it's like, okay, well, he had time, then how come others didn't also have time? But then at the same time, it's like, would he be able to do all this work on the side if it wasn't for RM kind of being the anchor of the group and taking some of the BTS group pressure off of the rest of them? And I don't think RM has been able to do a mixtape since Mono, but it could also be just a function of their workflow as different people, which I hate the word workflow, but that's what it is. It could be that RM is the kind that needs a lot of time and reflection to create art, whereas maybe Suga can just like show up for the day and it's like, okay, let me just start working on a song right now, and here's the words and here's the lyrics, and he might be the kind of person he can just show up and put something together, whereas RM needs more of the time and experiences and thinking about things. So that's just something that occurred to me, is like, yeah, Suga was able to do a lot of things on the side, but I'm not discounting what RM said. I just think it needs to be something they all do together as a group. It can't just be like, well, I'm taking time off, just me. I mean, that wouldn't even be possible because they're a group. Going back to where they were talking about the K-pop industry and all their demands, I know that Big Hit is not the worst company in K-pop, but it does make you think that they have contributed to BTS's exhaustion. And how many projects did they have to do that were just unnecessary, that just drained away BTS's energy? Like, there's so many things they did that were not music related. It was just like, this is so we can create merch, or this is so we can create content for our fans. But it didn't have to do with music a lot of the time. Like, for example, BT21. Like, I love BT21. I like all the characters. I like all the videos where they talked about designing them, and the little cartoons that happened, and all the like stuffed animals. I mean, I think that's great. I think it was a very successful project from a profit standpoint. But the problem is that is so successful that Big Hit was like, oh, let's do that again. Let's keep using BTS to create stuff, and then we'll create some like videos along with it, and that will act as marketing. And it's like, I mean, they must have sold so much BT21 merch out of, how many years they've had it. But, it's like, did we really need a BTS World or Seven Fates Choco or Maple Story, or, all these other like non-music projects that they did, which were great. And I would love it if they could do everything, but it clearly, like, anything they do is going to contribute to their time, and everything takes time, and it'll be part of their schedule. So I am going to blame Big Hit for filling up their schedule so full with stuff like that. And you just have to be more responsible, because at the end of the day, your company consists of people, and people have their limits. You can't just be working people nonstop. And I think it's just, BTS is so successful, it's hard to like turn down projects. It's like, oh, well, this is such a great project. Let's work with Louis Vuitton or work with whoever. And it's like, it's hard to say no, but I mean, they really needed to decline some things. Anything that isn't related to music, it's like, it has to really be worth it. And I don't know if Big Hit was selective enough, because they definitely contributed to this whole situation. And it seemed like later on, like this past year or two, that they were like, okay, the schedule's a bit lighter, and they have time off. Like in December they did that, like right after concerts. But I think it was a situation of too little, too late, because it needed to be more systematic. Like they need time off between albums and just fewer projects overall, like fewer commitments. And then, maybe this break wouldn't have had to happen. But, that's all in hindsight. I think hopefully going forward, they will realize that the schedule needs to not be so packed. But, at the same time, I'm grateful that we got the B album and Dynamite and Butter and Permission to Dance. And I do think some genuinely good music came out of that, even though this was not part of the plan. And another thing that adds to the pressure on BTS is that people are always saying how the K-pop industry is so evil and they are slave drivers and mistreat idols all the time. And I think that is a fair criticism, but I think maybe BTS didn't want to make the entire industry look bad by saying that they're struggling, because, people look at them and they're like, this is the model for K-pop. And it's like, if that's what's going on with BTS, then that's what's going on everywhere. So I think probably they were hesitant to voice these opinions, because then it just validates all the criticism people have of the K-pop model. And then people are like, oh, K-pop, the industry is so terrible. And it's really the whole music industry that has flaws. Something else that happened recently that kind of points to that is Halsey was saying that her label didn't want to let her release her music unless she created a viral TikTok. And so that just tells you, like, okay, did they care about the art or did they care about the marketing? And, I understand that if you're the record label, you need sales to happen, because that's how you're going to continue. But still, I mean, there needs to be a balance between the art and the marketing. So, yeah, I do think if ARMY watched that dinner afterwards, they're probably going through some emotions, and I think we weren't ready to hear all that. We didn't know everything that was going on. Maybe we had some sense of it a little bit, but I don't think we were all ready for all that. But, after having processed all of this, it's been a couple of days. So I think it feels okay. It feels like, we are all moving forward together. And we saw some more content release, like photo sketches and, more videos. And Jungkook was on V Live the next day and doing some karaoke and talking to ARMY, and others were posting on Weverse. So it just felt like, okay, it's a normal day. Life goes on, But yeah, I think we were upset because they were upset. But I think now that we all have an idea of what's going on, we can support their change in direction. And I think we all are excited to see what their solo content is going to look like. And we can also look forward to the group music once they're able to get that going. So I do think it's possible that a year's enough time for them to accomplish what they're looking for, because I think groups like to look at milestones, and like a 10th anniversary of the group, they might want to do something group related by then, by next Festa. So I think we'll all watch for that and hope that BTS is doing well individually as members. So then in the aftermath of the Festa dinner, there was a ton of misinformation out there. Like literally, like journalism, it couldn't be worse. The articles were talking about they've disbanded, they're not going to be a group anymore, it's over, it's a hiatus. All of these things that were incorrect. And so Hybe released a statement. They said that BTS is not taking a hiatus. It's going to be a focus on solo projects. And then V commented on Weverse, kind of talking more about the situation. He explained it very clearly. And like I said, Jungkook did a V Live, and he cleared it up again too. But, anybody who watched the dinner, they know exactly what BTS was trying to say and what's going on. So I really do think all of the poorly written articles were just a result of journalists who didn't watch the dinner, and they were just going on quotes or just going on like 5-second clips that they saw. So it was very irresponsible, and it just added to the confusion, because I think they were pretty clear if you watch the dinner. And even then, RM posted on Weverse a long message saying exactly what happened, and he was really disappointed at all the misinformation out there. So yeah, I think they cleared it up, and it makes sense. And he thanked ARMY for showing them support, and it was just very annoying to see all the misquotes the next day, because they were pretty clear what their mindset was. And even if you didn't watch the dinner or read all the messages they posted about it, look at the Yet to Come lyrics. That explains it too. So it's like, the message was out there everywhere, but only ARMY paid attention to the actual words that were said. So, I mean, there's a reason why journalism is one of the least respected professions right now. They're just posting misinformation and not doing their research. So it's pretty ridiculous. And you could tell in ARM's Weverse note that he was pretty furious with the media. And I'd love to know what his first draft looked like of that note. So hopefully ARMY is all doing okay now that we've had time to process all of the news we've heard. And BTS has not taken even a few minutes to take a break. Like, I don't know if you can even call it that, because we've gotten a lot of content and news lately, in particular solo and collab news. We just heard about Charlie Puth confirmed that he will be doing a song with Jungkook called Left and Right, which comes out June 24th. And if you're not aware, Charlie Puth is an American singer. And wait, is he or is he Canadian? Hold on. Okay, yeah, he's American, according to Google. And if you're ARMY, you know that Jungkook has been a big fan of his work. He has sung See You Again and We Don't Talk Anymore covers on SoundCloud and YouTube, I believe. So, Jungkook's a big fan. And then back in 2018, Charlie Puth was invited to one of the award shows to perform with BTS, and they all sang Fake Love together. And then Jungkook and Charlie Puth sang We Don't Talk Anymore as a duet. And after that, there was some situation where people thought Charlie Puth didn't like BTS anymore because he deleted some of his tweets that had praised them, but that could have just all been a misunderstanding. I think he deleted tweets just in general from his timeline, not necessarily because of not liking BTS anymore or disrespecting Jungkook. So that may have been just not a serious situation. But, clearly present day, Jungkook is still a fan of Charlie Puth. Otherwise, they wouldn't be working together on a song. And just like the past few weeks, I think it's been, Charlie Puth has been hinting at a collab, and then I can't remember exactly what they were, but his hints made it really obvious that it was with Jungkook. So people were expecting this announcement. Yeah, so then just recently, Charlie Puth posted this video that Jungkook was in, and he sang like, short piece of the song. And so that got everybody hyped about it. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty good song, and looking forward to that coming out. And I'm assuming that it'll be a single, but it will also be on his upcoming studio album, which is due to come out later this year. I've also seen news that a K-pop lyricist named Kim Ina said on a Korean show that she has been working with V on his first solo album. And so this news came out after the Festa dinner, and I don't know if that show was taped a while ago or is it just a coincidence that came out now. And it sounded like she and V have a mutual friend, and so she connected with him to discuss song lyrics, and since then V had sent her some of his demos, and so that sounds very interesting. I'm not very familiar with this woman's work, but it sounds like V is reaching out to people to assist him on his solo album. So it sounds like he's bringing in people and making progress. He's talking to songwriters and producers. So he must have an idea of what kind of album he wants to create, or at least he's been thinking about it. So I'm curious what that will be. When I picture a V album, I assume it's going to be several ballads, things like Winter Bear, Sweet Night, or Blue and Gray. But then there's also the side of V who's really been into jazz lately and said, Lady Gaga is his jazz queen. So I'm wondering if he's going to incorporate some jazz into his sound, or, some of that era, because that's a little bit different than what his solo songs normally sound like. So that's very interesting news here. And like I said, we also heard news that the J-Hope album was going to be released in mid-July, so it'll be out before his Lollapalooza performance. And this week we got to see all of the music show performances that they had taped last week. So I was looking forward to seeing that, since it's been over 2 years since they had performed at music shows. And they looked very upgraded this time. Like, they had set them up to look more like concerts than music shows. Although some of them looked kind of typical. They just had a set and then, BTS was there. But some of them look like very upgraded. Knowing this is going to be some of the last times they performed together as a group for a while, they must have wanted to make it more special. And if you watch the shows, you could tell that they were really trying to take it all in and remember the moments. Because I think they haven't performed with a close audience in a while. Like, when you perform in a stadium, that's very different. There's people just very far away, and it almost seems like you don't see faces necessarily. But they were on the 3 music shows this week, and you should be able to see all of the videos on YouTube. And I think it was really great to see that after a while. And, there were some funny moments, and you could also see that they did Yet to Come and For Youth at all of these shows. So it was great to hear those live again. And so at least we have a couple of times that it's been recorded that we have. So I appreciate that they did music shows as their comeback. And one thing I enjoyed was that during For Youth. Like, they're yet to come in For Youth. They don't really have choreography, but there's this one part in For Youth where they're all kind of moving in unison. That I think V created these moves, which they kind of look like they're inspired by Motown or Boyz II Men, kind of like all swaying together back and forth. So I think I enjoyed that part. So I think these music performances were a nice ending to chapter 1, and I think we're all looking forward to what chapter 2 means, how the members define that. We're already getting some hints of chapter 2 stuff, a lot of speculation and humor around that, and memes. So yeah, just in general, I think we're all looking forward to what chapter 2 for BTS means. You can listen to BTS Happy Hour on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast platforms, or visit btshappyhour.com. If you like the show, please take a moment to rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Weverse. If you've listened all the way to the end of the episode, thank you for being a true fan of the podcast. And in honor of Festa dinner, comment with a wine glass emoji on our latest Instagram post. Until next time, this has been the BTS Happy Hour. Thanks for listening, and remember, make every hour a happy one.